Well, now that we know that the lining fits and how it goes together, I'm going to go ahead and put this trim on. I'm just going to kind of eye this up and see that it fits okay. I want to be sure that when I do sew them together that the pink part matches. Down and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got all the pink on. This goes way down here. And now I'm going to put the scallops. I think I'm going to see about if I want the green ribbon on. And I think I do. I'm going to take a look at the scallops. Yeah. Yes, I think I do like them. I like the green. I don't think I want it up here. I don't think I do. Yeah, maybe I do want it up there. Well, I think I do. I think I found a new spot for it. So I'm going to put it up there. Put this down a bit. Okay. All right, that's what I'm going to do. I will pin this on, sew it on, and I'll be back. Okay, so I have the ribbon on and the scallop, and I turned this back just so I could see what it would look like there. I'm going to put just a bias edge on it. There we go. I'm going to put a bias edge on it right there. But I love the way this came out. Here's a kind of a close-up of it. I love the way that came out with that on the edge. I'm glad that I accidentally just laid that across there thinking I wasn't gonna like it, but I really did. This is just pinned on here. So now I've put the ribbon across here, and I'm going to do the rest of the pieces, and I will be back. So I'm just checked all of these to be sure that the ribbons match all the way across, because I would sure hate for one of them to be off when you get this all sewn together. So I'm just checking all the way, and they are going to match up just fine. Now's the time to move a ribbon before you sew it if it's not going to be matching up. So anyway, that's cool. So I will sew these and I'll be back. Okay, now just the same way that we laid out the ribbon, I now have laid out the scallops. This is how you have to lay these out. Do you see this? This is where your seam is, right here. But in order for the scallops to lay together right, you just, where you put this, you just find the place that it will go. You see, if I put that right to the seam right there, of course, it wouldn't look very good. You can see. So what you do is just move it along until you find where it's going to fit nicely. And this again, this needs to flow all the way across that same way. And on your last one down here, you'll pick up the last one and bring it. I'm going to show you a little. I'm going to bring this at this end just to be sure. And you can't see that, but it's got to match this end. That's going to match up around there. So it's got to match down there also, you know, to the front end. So anyway, you want this to be able to match all the way down, and you want your scallops to intersect at the right places where your seams are. So you're going to move that till it gets to the right place, like that. So here's where the seam is. Back here you can see, but I'm going to be cutting this scallop. I'm going to be cutting it right along here. So I'm going to double check this. I'll double check this right now while this is laid out, and then I will be cutting this, but I'm afraid to cut until I've really double checked it. So I'm going to go back again. I'm going to come down here and see that I have plenty. You can't, oh yeah, you can see that. I didn't think you could. Okay. I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to cut it flat to the seam because that would be clear back here. I am still going to give myself a little bit extra because I can come back and cut that piece after I seam it together. I can cut the extra off. So I'm leaving that at this point just a little bit long. I'm going to cut this part down here, same way. I believe I'm out of camera shot right there, but that's what I did, was do the other side. Okay. All right, now I'm going to come down here. I want to be sure all the way down that this matches one after the other. So that one's going to match right there pretty well because this is going to be in seam allowance right here, and this will pick right up. So we'll take this one. Here's the seam here. Here's the seam. I'm going to cut this about a ½ inch over, overlapping the other, because after I sew that together, I'll be able to cut the excess off. This is just kind of an extra safety precaution that I don't end up cutting something that I didn't want to cut. This one's like that. I can cut it right there. Take that off and bring this one there. I don't really have to cut much of that off at all. Okay. That's going to fit. So I'm clear off of the table here, but looks like everything will fit just fine. So I will pin this together and then I'll go sew it and I'll come back. Okay, one thing I wanted to tell you before I sew this together is that when you've laid this out and you've got it pinned, a good way to kind of double check everything is just take one of your pieces, and anywhere you lay that, you should be able to find your bottom there, find the bottom and the ribbon anywhere you lay it. So that'll just help double check. And then, you know, when it's all said and done, I end up putting it on the floor and laying it all the way out to be sure, just because we really need these to all match up together. So here's the first one that I was going to sew, and I thought, well, I will bring you in on this part of it for a minute, because this, you'll look at this just as a double check, and you can see right here that this line matches up very well all the way across, and no matter where you lay this, it does match. So you want to just do it that way, and you'll just feel better about having it right on. Yeah, this should be fine. This one's in the middle of that one, not on the end, but it looks like it's very, very close. So, okay, well, that's what I was going to tell you, so I will come back in a bit. By the way, whenever you put the front to the top, I forgot to mention a minute ago, don't just be careful along here. Be sure that you square up the sides, because that you're working with this ribbon. Whenever it goes down, it could make your ribbon go uphill or downhill. So I forgot to tell you to just don't only watch here, also be sure that you're square on your fabric on each end here too. So I have sewn the one side, and I came back to do that, and I thought, well, I'm better tell you that, just I know that it'll probably come natural to you to do that, but just in case you're a beginner. So now when I sewed this first, this is the top, this is the front, and when I sewed this, this tended to put the seam allowance laid forward on the machine, and I laid it up on there, and it's very pretty. So on my weight of this fabric, the seam allowance tended to want to go down towards the front of the machine. So hopefully the back's going to lay just the same nice soft way, and I'll be back in a moment. There you go. Here's the front, and it's sewn to the top, and then here's the back piece, and hook on over to here and lay down back this way, and this one is going to sew right here and lay out this way. Okay, I don't think, yeah, that's as far away as that camera's going to get. So anyway, I am going to just attach this, and like we did on the lining, here's my seams right here, and I'm just going to overlap this and that just to make it as even as I can. This gets to be about 4 or 5 layers, so if you don't have a walking foot, just be very slow going across all your layers of cotton and material. Try to make this as square as you can. I know you don't have anything to square it up with, but if you can make a visual, and I'm looking at this visual right here to go along here. This is just cut a little long, of course, because I did that a while ago. But see this, I'm just using that little stripe. Hopefully you'll have some kind of a visual, and you'll check up here. And I'm going to pin that there. In a minute, I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and sew a good, I'm doing about between 1/4 and 3/8 inch seam on all around, just because I have the extra space, and this will give this top a stand up. You know, if you did a scant quarter, then it may not stand up quite as well as if you give it a good seam there, and we have that space to do it. Okay, so there's right about there. I'm going to see if this fits, square it up on the edges to look at it. And I'm going to pin this part down also. Sorry, my arm is in the way. I'm just have one way of doing things since I've done it for 60 years. And so, okay, so I'm just going to take this over now. I'm going to sew right along here. When I come back, these will fold out like that. That will be the ends. And I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got these 2 ends sewn down, and remember a while ago whenever I did the lining, I told you to leave a little bit this open and not sewn all the way down to the edges. I forgot to tell you that just now, but when I was sewing it I realized this needs to be up, and that's the point that we can pivot with. So if I were sewing by myself and I wasn't doing this tutorial, then I would just pivot right while I was on the machine. But since I'm doing this, I thought, well, I better bring this over and show it to you again. So here's like this. If your needle was still down in there, all you'd have to do is just pivot that one side. The other side you'd have to do it like I'm doing right here, but one side that you finish with, you can pivot just like that. Now what I'm going to do, of course we're going to pivot those sides, so what I'm going to do, and I pulled this up, you see how nice that is right there, that's where you pivot. What I'm going to do is take a look at this edge and be sure that everything is lining up like I expect it to. the thing I'm really looking at is this ribbon. Can you see that? That ribbon, I want that to line up. Even if I have to make adjustment up here, I want that to line up. So I'm going to lay that down. I am laying now the scallop. The pink has to match and the ribbon matches. I got a little bit extra up here, but not bad, and it will work into the corner. The corner will be the place where I will work that in, and it's not going to be really a gather, but it's going to be just like it should be. It's just going to lay down and around, and they'll have a little bit of a little pucker there for a corner, and that's it. Now as I work up here, I don't even see that it's going to do that for sure. So right there is how much difference it is going to make. Hardly none. And if you didn't make it up right there, you would really see that ribbon. You'd really see that ribbon if it wasn't straight. So here we've got that edge, and this is hard to tell what this is, but it's the back corner edge. So I'm going to go sew this, and I will come back. This is beautiful, and it's where I would generally tell you to go inside and trim some of the seam allowance in here. Don't do it in your corners, because this is what helps your cover stand up real stiff. Otherwise it would just kind of hang down. And I would cut this extra out just because it'll make it tight around the bottom of your sewing machine. So I just cut that off so that it fits well. Cut this one off too. This is at the bottoms of where you sewed. I still left a pretty good seam allowance, but this was not, it was just like a 1/4 inch. But up here you see there's a large amount of knotted, that corner where you pivoted. This makes it real nice and substantial to hold its weight up. So don't trim all of this off. Normally you would cut the corner and trim this down and leave a little bit. Well, don't, because what it will do is give this strength to stand up at the top of your machine, and it will make it a nice square corner. So you see it's standing up by itself right there. So I'm going to go do the other side, and you see that's a nice corner. So I'm going to go do this side now. I have to pivot this around. So this is the opposite side, and all I'm going to do is take the same thing. This gets a little bit bulky because we've got the other side done now, but I'm going to lay that out really nice and flat, and I'm going to take this end, this is that little short end, to pivot around toward you. And you know what, that just now struck me. If I don't put a pin in this scallop, it could end up getting in my needle and sew a wrong way. Okay, so I'm going to pivot this right around and match everything up again. I'm going to take this, any extra, and it's going to end up here at the top corner. If there's anything extra that does not fit, I'm going to make it fit right now. This does have a little extra sticking out there. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off because I know that I might miss the straight edge if I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that off and then get that right on that straight edge. Here's my ribbon that I can see. There's my scallop that I can see, ribbon that I can see. And it's going to come straight up there. It looks like it's going to match real nicely. So, you know, I got to be at my grandmother's knee whenever I was very young, and she taught me, and my grandmother taught my mother how to quilt, and actually my grandmother's mother taught her. So I am a 4th generation quilter, and I still, you know, I still make mistakes, and I still have things that don't match. If you weren't fortunate enough to have a quilter in your family that taught you, and you're just learning, but you have a heart to learn and you want to learn, please write to me in your comments and tell me where you feel like you would like to have lessons, because I've taught my grandchildren to make quilts. I'm continually teaching them more because I think it's a very important tradition to pass down. And you know, one day you'll have grandchildren, maybe you already do, and you can pass this down. Even if you didn't have a quilter in your history, maybe you can be that quilter. So let's see, or seamstress. I'm much more a quilter than I am a seamstress, but I wanted to have this tutorial about this. And you know, I didn't have a pattern, so I'm just making this kind of up as I go. So hopefully this will help you to see that you can draw your own patterns too. Okay, so I'm going to go to the sewing machine, do this one side, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm on my last corner, and if this is difficult, I want you to see this. It's difficult for all of us. If this is difficult to figure out where you're at, turn it all wrong side out again. If it's balling up on you and it's difficult, turn the other side all wrong side out again. Okay, when you pick it up, you're going to see what I'm showing you here. It's just that, and we're here at this edge, and now I'm going to pivot this around like we've been doing. And if you were right here, it would be a lot easier for you to see, but if you can't see on your own, when you're designing your own, if you can't see, just turn everything wrong side out so that you can tell more about what you're doing with it. And so now I'm at this place. I do not want to catch this inside fabric, so I'm just going to be sure it's out of the way, and then I'm going to just do that. That's all we're doing. And we did that times 3, and now we're on the 4th one. So we are pivoting around, and however this ends up being comfortable to you or to me sewing it, you're just pivoting it around, and then I'm looking for the last time at the last corner, and I want that ribbon to match. I'm wanting this part to match. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down a little bit. What I'm doing is just matching to the seam. This is going to be inside the seam, but you see it's that much longer than the pink there, you see. So I have to know that that's what is back there. I don't want to not catch that bottom part. I don't want to fail to catch the whole seam, not just these things. I know I'm very confusing to listen to sometimes. There's the ribbon. There's the top edge of the scallop. There's the bottom, and there's the hem part. So we'll take a pin. I want that all to catch in there. If it seems like I'm mighty uncoordinated, it's because I'm kind of working upside down. I'm really not usually this quite this uncoordinated, but I'm working upside down so that you can see it better, because I've done this before, but I mean not this particular thing before, but just in case I've got some beginners, I don't want it to be working upside down to them, so I'm working upside down to me. Okay, so here's the part that we are pivoting, and it looks like it's going to lay just as sweet as the other 3 did, so hopefully this will be a real nice seam, and we'll be done here in just a minute. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm almost done with it. All we have left now is to just put the lining in on it, and then I'm going to put this little bit of bias. It's not, I didn't buy bias tape, but what I did was just take a 3-inch strip of green and iron it down, this little bit right here and this little bit right here, and then once I ironed it down, I folded it over and ironed it. So I did not buy bias. I think sometimes bias looks like it's store-bought bias, so I would rather use my own fabric, and it doesn't have to be cut on the bias. The only time it ever does is if you're going to need to kind of stretch it around curves at the bottom. So we're not. So I'm going to put that border on and we are going to be in business. So anyway, I'll be right back. We're going to do the lining on camera, and then we will do the binding. Okay, so there's the cover, and you know, I don't really like this little bump right here. What that is the bobbin winder and the thread keeper, and there's the that little tension screw right there. It just kind of looks sort of like this on there, which is fine for a cover if you want to just leave it like that. But I got to thinking, what if I made just a polyester fiber fill little flat pad up under there? Would that make it lay a little bit more square? So I actually did make that pad, and it really wouldn't have to have any fabric on it at all. But I was thinking, before I put the lining on and before I put the border down at the bottom, I'm just going to fold that up with some polyester fiber fill and just see what that would look like on top. So here's the top without, it's only got just 2 layers of Warm and Natural on the top, and I'm going to put this pad under and see what it looks like, and I'll be right back. And voila, I think it looks a lot better. Since I made it, I'm going to go ahead and put it in, but it's a whole lot softer on top, and it doesn't have just the material thickness. I think it really helped it a little bit. So if you want to put a few layers, what it was just like 3 layers of polyester fiber fill that I just folded over and put in there, and then it just made that kind of all smooth. It did shorten it up just a little bit, but my goodness, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. Whenever I put the border on, it won't quite touch the table, but you know what, I think it's worth it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. Okay, we'll go ahead and put the inside lining on next. Oh, and I'm just going to tack that in there, because when I put the lining in, it'll go ahead and hold the rest of it in place. You know, while I'm tacking this down, I've got to tell you, I'm thinking about the difference in what my grandchildren or children would say about me adding this padding to the top, so this would look a little bit smoother and prettier. And I'm thinking that my children would probably say, "Ain't no much, Mom," you know, because it doesn't seem like it would make a big difference. And then my mom would say, "You come by it natural." That's exactly what I would do. If it made it look better after you've spent that time on it, if it made it look better, then that's what I would do too. And my grandma would say, "Well, I expect that does look better." So it's just sort of, that's the way quilting is, isn't it? It's just, you think about where you came from, who taught you, and it's kind of a special thing. I know this is kind of funny that I would add this pad to this, but you know, it's the first one that I've done, and I just kind of ad-libbed as I was going to make it pretty, and that's what it takes to make it finished out and look pretty to me. So maybe you will like to do this, maybe you won't want to do this, but you know how if you decide to. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm tacking this real lightly, but all the way around it, and then when I put the lining in, it'll stay put. So, and I'll be back in a minute. Ta-da! Nicely fitted. I like it. I feel like it's finished prettier. Nicely fitted. I'm very happy with that. So let's put the lining in. Okay, so we're going to put the lining in now. I will move this sweet little sewing machine that I love so much. And there's the padding inside. Okay. If a person didn't even want to put a liner in it, you wouldn't even have to, I don't think. But anyway, I'm going to turn it wrong side out. I think that'll make it a little bit easier to get on. And since it's wrong side out, we're going to put the seams on the inside. And this is the part you'll see. So far so good. Now, if I've ended up making this so fat that this won't fit on it, I won't think that's so pretty, will I? That happens sometimes when you're ad-libbing, by the way. But, you know, I think the nice thing about being able to kind of just work with things and know that the worst that can happen is you have to take it out, that's not too bad. Looks like it's going to fit just fine. It's like putting a pillow in a pillowcase. And there we have it. Looks like it's going to fit just fine. So, all I'm going to do at this point, I'm trying to think if I'm going to put a couple of tacks. I believe I will. I'm going to put tacks in each of the four corners. And then I will pin all the way around the bottom so it will sew evenly. And I'm going to sew that together, and then I will put the border on it. So only thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put a few tacks in it and get the pins around the bottom, and I will come back. Just going to run a seam all the way around as the pins stay in there so it doesn't move, and then I'll cut this off after that. And after I cut that, then I'll put the border on, and I'll show you that in a moment. Yay, we're to the very end, and at this point we're going to make a binding that's going to go around the bottom of the cover, and I'm going to show you how to do that, but this is going to be where we're going to end up, right here. Okay, so we'll start. For the binding on the bottom of our sewing machine cover, we need 3 inches by 63 inches. So once you have your 3 inches, it's going to be laid out like this. It's going to look flat like this. And what I do is I just turn under 1/4 inch all the way down. And I turn under 1/4 inch on the top all the way down, and then just fold it in half, and that makes a real nice binding. If you needed it to be on the bias, the reason that you would need it to be on the bias is if you had very curvy binding, that you needed that extra stretch, because on a bias it has more stretch. This has no stretch, it's flat, it's doesn't have stretch, but the bottom of this cover is just straight lines, so we don't need it to be on the bias. Now there was a couple of places where I spliced, move that around. There was a couple of places where I spliced this binding, and here it is right here. And you'll see that it's diagonally spliced. And the reason that is that if it were just butted together like this and just spliced like this, it would be a lot thicker. So I'll show you real quick how to do a diagonal splice. Okay, Okay, so just pretend like this is two long pieces and we need to splice them together. And in order to do the diagonal, I just go ahead and lay it right on there like I want it to look. You see? Just fold it. All I did was just fold one side down so it gave me a diagonal. Just lay it on there like that and iron. There's a lot of technical ways to do this, but to me it shows a nice diagonal just to do it just like that. I just turn it over. You can finger crease it. You don't even have to iron it. You can just finger crease it. And then you can see right along here is where the fold is. I just pin it like that and I take it right over to the sewing machine and sew right along that creased line. Whenever it gets sewn, then I just take I bring it back over and take my scissors and just cut 1/4 of an inch away from the sewn line. I didn't sew it here, but you get the idea. So then when it goes back down, it's just like that. That's all there is to it. There's, like I said, there's a lot of technical ways to do it, but basically if you just turn it under like that, that then, had I sewn this, that would give you the way to just turn it right over and make the rest of the binding. So the very last thing to do is to go ahead and turn your binding over and hand sew or top stitch right along this edge. I'm going to hand sew mine. If you top stitch, it will probably curl up a little bit because of the thickness of the quilting on it. But there's the back side. Here's the back side, and here's the front side. So I'm just going to hand stitch on the outside and we'll be ready. I'll be done.